Today's scripture is from Isaiah 42, 1 through 9. Here is my servant, whom I uphold, my chosen, in whom my soul delights. I have put my spirit upon him. He will bring forth justice to the nations. He will not cry or lift up his voice or make it heard in the street. A bruised reed he will not break, and a dimly burning wick he will not quench. He will faithfully bring forth justice. He will not grow faint or be crushed until he has established justice in the earth, and the coastlands wait for his teaching. Thus says God the Lord, who created the heavens and stretched them out, who spread out the earth and what comes from it, who gives breath to the people upon it, and spirit to those who walk in it. I am the Lord. I have called you in righteousness. I have taken you by the hand and kept you. I have given you as a covenant to the people, a light to the nations, to open the eyes that are blind, to bring out the prisoners from the dungeon, from prison those who sit in darkness. I am the Lord, that is my name. My glory I give to no other, nor my praise to idols. See, the former things have come to pass, and new things I now declare. Before they spring forth, I tell you of them. The word of the Lord for the people of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
I'm going to come down here closer to you. Is that all right? Okay, here we go. I gave this sermon at 8 o'clock, and I could see the people's eyes glaze over. And that is never a good thing. That's never a good thing. So I changed it around, and so I'll use kind of the model, but it's not the same. It's not the same thing as the people at 8 o'clock heard. So let them know that. This week I was invited to the Episcopal Center downtown to meet with the Bishop of the Episcopal Church of the Utah area, and with a few other Episcopal priests and a couple of other United Methodist pastors. Now, I haven't had very many lunches with the bishop of either the United Methodist Church or the Episcopal Church. That's the first one. But you want to make sure that your shoes are shined in something like that. You want to put together, your best effort to look like you at least have things, kind of collected. So I was a little nervous, but there Bishop Hayashi was, and he welcomed us into the Episcopal Center and knew my name somehow. I don't know how, but he said, "Oh, you must be Rusty." And I said, "Yeah, I am." "What are you, some kind of precognition kind of person? What is this?" So anyway, went down there, and then we had lunch. And as we were having lunch, he says, "I've been working on a group since 2002 with a group of Episcopalian priests and United Methodist pastors since 2002 to develop plans for full communion between the Episcopal Church and the Methodist Church." Now, full communion means that I would be able to go into an Episcopal church and serve communion there. And likewise, an Episcopal priest could come over here and serve communion to you all. And so he said, "I've been working on this since 2002 with a number of people, but now, since the protocol was signed a couple weeks ago that says the United Methodist Church will split into two, the conservatives and the progressives kind of splitting, with the centrists probably going with the progressives mostly," he said, "all that work is down the tube." And so, 18 years of work, well, it was supposed to be voted on this general conference, and now it probably won't be. So he wanted to talk to us about it. And then he said, what do you think about all this? And we told him what we thought and how it would go. And so through the majority of the lunch, we talked about United Methodist Church and our struggle with LGBTQ issues. And then we talked about the Episcopal Church, who's already been through that, and they've already settled that. some years ago, a decade ago. And so at the very end, Bishop looks at the three United Methodist pastors and he asks us the question. He says, "What is your hope?" And have you been in one of those, have you been in a class when you don't know the answer, but somehow the teacher knows that you don't know the answer? Have you ever been there? That's what it felt like to me. And so luckily, my two colleagues, they answered, they volunteered their answers about what they hoped for. And I couldn't say, I hope for the exact same thing that they do. That would make me sound like a dolt. And I didn't want to do that. And so I was trying to figure out, what can I say? What is my hope? Because most of the time when people ask, what is your hope? They don't necessarily ask it with that question. They will ask, for example, another question. Like if you're a student, a junior or senior in high school, they will say something like, where do you plan to go to college? Or do you plan to go to college? In a sense, there's a piece of hope in that. Or if you're a businessman, they might ask, how do you think the next year's going to go? And the businessman would answer. And so it goes. All those kinds of questions are around hope, but they're not exactly the question, what do you hope for? That set me back on my heels. And so anyway, at the end of the meal, he says that, and I think to myself, what do I hope for? And what I came up with is not the greatest answer, but this is what I hope for the United Methodist Church in the future. In the 30 years that I've been a pastor, the main issue, there's been two issues. The main issue has been over the LGBTQ issue, and second, the decline or the diminishment of church. Those are the two main things that I have been looking at over 30 years of ministry. And so I said, what I hope is that the next generation of Methodist pastors do not have to deal with that issue is behind us. We've solved it. We're going forward, right? It's not the greatest answer, but it was all I could come up with in a couple minutes. So, there are so many things, I think, in the world that drag us down. At least there are for me. These fires, I see these animals that have all died. It just hurts my heart. And then, the divisiveness in the country, and the climate change, and the international trade, and immigration, and tremendous debt, and the vast amount of money we spend on defense, and all of those things seem to be at hand. And there's a type of sermon in the world that points out something wrong in the world and says, just go to the Bible. The Bible has the answer for it. And I've never been able to do that very well. It's not the kind of sermons that's not the way that I think. And so I have all these problems that I think the world is coming at us with. And I don't want to be identified as that old guy that's in The Simpsons, and he's sitting on the porch, and the kids run out on his lawn, and he's rocking in his rocking chair, and he's always yelling, "Hey, you kids, get off my lawn!" I don't want to be that person. But here's the thing. I am a member of the baby boomers. How many of you are members of the baby boomers? I just want to see. You will admit it then. So there's this new thing from the next generation. And it's come out in the last few months. You've probably heard it. When baby boomers do something or say something, like they try to tell the solution to the problem to the next generation goes, "Okay, boomer. My son said that to me 2 weeks ago. I don't think it's fair. It's not right." So yeah, I think it's true at the same time. For crying out loud, we do not have all the answers to all the problems. The next generations will have some of the answers, that they'll have their own set of problems too, I know. In today's scripture is one of the servant songs. That's what they're called. There's 4 scriptures in Isaiah from chapter 42 to chapter 53, and they look like songs or psalms, and they're called the servant songs. And so this is the first of the servant songs. Now, there are problems in the world, in their world, and so Isaiah, the writer, is hoping for someone to come along and solve those problems. And so people have tried to figure out who exactly the servant is that is referred to in the servant songs. Who is it? And some people think that it was Cyrus, this Persian king, who allowed the Jewish people to come back into Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. That's one of the people who they thought the servant was. The second servant is the whole people of Israel. They were supposed to be the servants. And then the third is what we know as Christians, which is 500 years later, Matthew and Luke, especially Matthew, looks and he goes, Jesus is the servant that is being referred to in these texts in Isaiah. Well, what I like to think is that perhaps it's not a reference to some historical figure or a community, but instead, that servant song, we can use it ourselves as a catalyst for reflection on the nature of the response that's demanded of us from God. I'm always in need of asking myself and asking you, what is the claim that God has on you and me? What is the claim? And so Isaiah has at the beginning of this piece of scripture the idea of, here is my servant, and then halfway through, I don't know if you noticed it, in verse 6 it says this, I have called you in righteousness. I have called you in righteousness. I have taken you by the hand. I have given you as a covenant to the people. You are supposed to be a light to the nations. You are supposed to open the eyes that are blind. You are supposed to bring out prisoners from the dungeon. It changed. It changes. And here's the thing. I think when Jesus heard that text, I don't know how many times he heard it, but he heard it, and then he took it into himself, because the first time he goes to preach to anybody, he says this, God has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And so he responded to the words from Isaiah with his whole life and his whole heart. And the question is for us, are we supposed to do that too? And the answer is, I think so. I think so. It's a charge to us to address the issues of our world, whatever they might be, whatever they are. Whatever they are, we're supposed to get in there and try to help fix them too. To take it all up in our hearts and in our hands. And that's no easy task, but it doesn't let us off the hook. We're the ones. Now. Amen? Amen.
Awake, awake, let every heart in the west praise.